What's up, everybody? Good late morning, and we've had a little bit of an action-packed morning so far. The last couple of hours have given us quite a bit of information, quite a bit of, I'd even go so far as to call it news, and it does directly impact the Seattle Seahawks. So let's talk about it. This video is powered by BetUS. And we'll start with the big one, and then we'll finish up with the more tangentially related one at the end of the video. But let's start with the big one because we're going to have to spend some time on this one. For the first time, maybe ever, at least for the first time in a while, I would go that far. We actually have something approaching a concrete piece of evidence that the Seattle Seahawks are not completely enamored with DK Metcalf being a long-term Seattle Seahawk, and that they're at least open to the possibility of moving him for the right compensation. Now, that's not to say a trade is imminent. That's not to say a trade is in the works. But today was the first time, to my knowledge, that we've heard something of real substance that indicates that something could happen with DK Metcalf. So we got to talk about this one. Corbin Smith was the initial voice on this. He was actually tweeting about this about, what was it now, 4 hours ago. So early this morning, it started up. And ever since then, a significant portion of Seahawks Twitter and some of just NFL Twitter, X, or whatever in general has been buzzing about this. So here's the initial tweet. Hearing through multiple sources that the Seahawks have spoken with a couple of teams about DK Metcalf's availability this week in Indy. As John Snyder has pointed out before, simply talking to another team doesn't mean a trade is imminent, but worth keeping an eye on. So that's kind of the important part here. There's nothing imminent, and I'm not trying to make this video pretending as if anything is imminent. And I maintain that deals like this have so many moving parts, it is still more likely than not that nothing happens, but it's on the table now in a way that it has never been before. Corbin goes on to say, from my understanding, Seattle isn't actively shopping Metcalf, but at least one team that has inquired feels that they have the trade package in place to make Schneider strongly consider pulling the trigger, and he's at least been willing to listen. Now, what that really means is that Schneider's doing his job. You should always be willing to listen to almost anything. Unless you have a Patrick Mahomes type of player, you should always be willing to consider anything. He goes on, and this is kind of the thing that a lot of people are glomming onto this morning. One team to keep close tabs on, according to him, is the Packers. They have an offer on the table that includes a high pick and a young receiver on the roster to acquire Metcalf. So it seems like the Packers are the team that is going for it here, and that makes a decent amount of sense. The Packers are a team that have a lot of decent receivers. They don't have an over-the-top great receiver, and trading for DK Metcalf would be one of their opportunities to do so. So that's basically the core of what we're talking about here. The Seahawks might not be completely closing the door on a Metcalf trade, and the Packers are the team that is looking like they might be interested in taking a shot at things. So certainly interesting. But before we go any further, I want to talk about the buddies over at BetUS, the best online sportsbook and casino. I know the football season's over, but there's still a lot of stuff you can bet on, including football stuff. You can bet on stuff like where's Cooper Kupp going to end up, bet on where DK Metcalf is going to end up, bet on where Jair Alexander is going to end up, bet on things like is Rob Gronkowski coming back to the NFL, where is Myles Garrett going to end up, where is Deebo Samuel going to end up. You have the opportunity to bet on this stuff. You can bet on basketball, bet on hockey, bet on baseball very soon here. So get on over to BetUS. Use promo code YouTube150 to get a 150% deposit bonus on your first deposit up to $2,000, and then 125% deposit bonus on your next two deposits up to $2,000. Check them out. Get your free money. Get to some sports betting. BetUS. Get it done. All right. So anyway, back to the DK Metcalf trade possibilities here. Peter Bukowski on X confirmed what Corbin Smith was saying. League source told me Green Bay has been working on this and has an offer they think can land DK Metcalf. Then the hope is trading Jair Alexander to backfill some of the lost draft capital if they can get it. So obviously DK Metcalf is going to be worth a lot more than Jair, but you can offset some of your losses by trading Jair. So the pieces line up relatively well. I don't know much about Peter Bukowski. I don't know what his track record is, but it is something that is confirming what we know from Corbin. And Corbin's pretty good at this, right? Corbin should be fairly credible. Corbin should be somebody who tends to get this stuff right. Speaking of Corbin, he would go on to say that for the Seahawks to move DK Metcalf, trade would have to be structured to receive Green Bay first round pick, 26 overall, and either Romeo Doubs or Dontarian Wicks in exchange for Metcalf and either a fourth round or fifth round pick. So that's basically what it would take. So really what you're talking about is DK Metcalf for the number 26, and then either Romeo Doubs or Dontarian Wicks for like a fourth or fifth round pick. So that being the case, I think that's actually a pretty decent arrangement. I'm not going to say I'm in love with it. That's pretty good. I would hope that that day 3 selection can get bumped down a little bit. I think that if you're giving up somebody like Metcalf for a late first round pick in a draft that isn't even a great draft in my estimation, then I don't think you should be giving up an additional valuable pick, even if it's just like a fourth or fifth round pick. But regardless of that, in a general sense, I don't think this trade is too bad. I think this trade works fairly well, theoretically. This would be something that I would at least be open to as a Seahawks fan. Late first round pick and a decent receiver. It doesn't sound like Jayden Reed is on the board, which that would have been a clincher for me. If it was number 26 and Jayden Reed, I'd probably be pretty enthusiastic about it. Doubs and Wicks, not so much. They're decent players, but I wouldn't be over the moon about either of them. And then you have, I guess, Christian Watson. With him, the injuries are just really, really scary. So even though his talent is, I think, clearly more than what Doubs or Wicks have, I don't know if I could do that. So just in case those guys get involved, those would be my thoughts on those guys. But that's what it would take. I would hope the Seahawks are resolute here. I would hope the Seahawks take the approach of, look, if we can get the trade we want, we'll consider it, but we're not going to force the trade that we don't like just because we want to move this guy so badly that we just need to get him out of town. So hopefully they're willing to be resolute. Now, there is another side to all this. Nemhauser chimed in with his own thoughts earlier this morning. Initial tweet was DK Metcalf isn't going anywhere, and when he was asked about it, he didn't really have a source, and I do want to stress that he doesn't have a source. He's just saying, based on what guys like Schneider, McDonald, and Kubiak have said, there's no way Metcalf is going to go anywhere. If you listen to their words, it's very clear they plan on building around him, which is definitely true. Doesn't always mean that that's the way things are going to end up going. And for whatever it's worth, we also had Matt Schneidman claim that there's been no negotiations between Green Bay and Seattle regarding DK Metcalf. Now, he doesn't give a source, of course, and I don't know much about Matt Schneidman either. So I guess you could say somebody is lying here. But regardless of who you decide to believe, regardless of what side of this debate you fall on, I think what is going on here is pretty clear. I think the Seahawks intend on keeping DK Metcalf. I think right now their primary plan is to get him on an extension that keeps him in Seattle until he's beyond 30 years old, get him on a long-term deal that gets his cap number down for 2025. But at the same time, there is a possibility that the deal that they try to get DK Metcalf on doesn't materialize the way they want it. Because DK's in an interesting situation right now. He's clearly a very talented and he's a very good receiver. but his production in the last few years have not indicated that he is a great or elite receiver, but he's close enough to that to where he might feel like he should be paid like one. And I think that there's room to at least argue that his struggles in production the last few years have been about the offensive coordinator, be it Waldron or Grubb. And I think that's something that DK might use to bring to the table here. So there is a possibility that both sides want to get something done, and it can't happen because Metcalf wants to get paid like a top 3 receiver, and the Seahawks want to pay him like a top 10 receiver, and they can't find a way to meet in the middle, right? Honestly, paying DK like a top 10 receiver is a little bit dicey as is. I think that's just how things are going to go, especially because the cap just went up the way that it did. But paying him that kind of money is already a little bit dicey, but it's understandable. If you pay him like a top 3 receiver, if you go up to like that 35 million a year mark, you're really paying him based off stuff that there's no concrete evidence of. Metcalf has made the All-Pro team once in his career back in 2020. He was All-Pro second team, by the way. And while he clearly is very good, there's also reason to believe that he's not great, and we don't know if he's going to be great. So that's why stuff like this comes up, I think. They're hoping to get Metcalf on an extension that ultimately they hope where they land, I think, is somewhere in the realm of $30 million a year. So if they extend him so that his deal becomes 4 years, 120 million, so that would be like an extension of 3 years, 88 million, they'd be good with that. But if DK wants more than that and he's unwilling to meet them at the 3 for 88 mark, they want to have a back door. This is what happened with Frank Clark. They wanted to keep Frank Clark, but Frank Clark would not come down from his contract negotiation standing where he wanted more money than Seattle could or would give him. So they traded him. And I think they want to make sure they have a backup plan in case the same thing happens here. And you look at this scenario on paper, it can go that way very easily. The Seahawks have a clear leg to stand on, maybe even 2 legs to stand on, when they, in their belief that DK is not even a top 20 receiver in the NFL right now and should be paid obviously more than top 20, but he should be paid accordingly. He should be paid more in that second tier than that first tier. And DK, I think, does have a leg to stand on that he should be paid like a tier 1 guy, even if I wouldn't do it because at a certain point you are what you are. So I think that's what this is. And hey, Green Bay is a great leverage tactic for the Seahawks to employ. I doubt DK wants to go to Green Bay. I don't think DK Metcalf would be excited about that. It's cold. It's a smaller town. It's a smaller part of America. There's not a lot to do. We know DK, the stuff he likes to do off the field. It's going to be a lot harder to do in Green Bay than it is pretty much anywhere else. And I don't think that Green Bay is all that much closer to winning a title than Seattle. Like, at least with Frank Clark, he went to Kansas City, and it was clear as day Kansas City was on the verge of being a team that routinely competed for Super Bowls in a way that Seattle wasn't set up to at that time. Green Bay, to me, is just kind of set up to be basically about what Seattle is right now. Seattle is set up to be going forward, where they look like they're going to be a pretty good team, but it's going to be really hard for them to break through, in my estimation. And they need to do the right stuff. Same position as Seattle, so it's not like DK standing there would improve. So be prepared for anything, guys. And from my perspective, as somebody who is a little bit fed up with DK Metcalf, but also doesn't want to move him because I want to try to make it work with what we have. This is not a bad trade. This is not a bad arrangement at all. And if this is the way things go, then I can certainly live with it as a Seahawks fan. All right. So that's all the DK Metcalf stuff we have. It's at least worth discussing. if nothing else happens from here, I'm not going to talk about it too much more on this channel. One other thing that happened earlier today was that Matthew Stafford reached a restructured contract with the Rams per Schefter, so it's over. He's not getting traded. There's no point even discussing it anymore. He's going to be a Ram next year. And look, on the one hand, this means the Rams are guaranteed to have at least a capable quarterback next year. I think that he could possibly age very quickly starting this offseason. We are talking about a guy with a ton of miles on him on top of his age. But on the other hand, it also means they're not going to be able to trade him for a first round pick or something like that, which some people were acting like they could. And I didn't want that to happen either. So mixed thoughts. On the one hand, the Rams are now going to be harder to deal with in 2025 because they keep a quarterback that can play. This is certainly better than Jimmy Garoppolo or Jameis Winston or whoever, but at least they don't get the big trade compensation for him. And there is still significant downside to sticking with Stafford for another year because this can end at any moment. This can go into a place where he's like that. Remember final year Brett Favre, that final year where he just completely lost it. Like that could be coming for Stafford sooner rather than later. So mixed thoughts, but overall, that's it is what it is. All right, let me know what you guys think about all that. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. The Combine stuff starts in just a few minutes, so I will be watching that, and I'll make videos later today. But for now, go Hawks.